So with me here is, without much ado, is Samy Karim from BNB Chain. And Samy, welcome to the session today.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm sure the audience are excited to listen to what you have to say. And pre you coming along, I already have quite a number of questions for people waiting for you specifically. So I wish you good luck on the question side, and I will see you at the end of your session. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, John. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Samy. I'm part of the BNB chain team. So for those who don't know, BNB chain, which was previously called Binance Smart Chain, it's a EVM compatible chain that was launched in September 2020. And it's been in quite a journey since then. So today, BNB chain is the most used chain in terms of number of active addresses. So it ranges between 1 to 2 million daily active addresses. At its peak was way above 2 million. And it's the home for a very large DeFi ecosystem, a lot of gaming applications built on there. So for the BNB chain team, I also want to share a little bit of background in terms of how did we really get here and how are we really thinking about scalable blockchain infrastructure that can support mass adoption use cases. So for us, we spend a lot of time thinking about how to really develop and scale infrastructure that can support applications that reach tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then eventually a billion users. So if we look at also the journey of how we got here, it went through a kind of evolution and some kind of painful growth periods. So when we first launched BNB Chain back in September 2020, if we go back in time, that was really when DeFi summer was really kicking off. Compound launched the Comp token, which was driving a lot of activity in the DeFi space. But alongside that time, we were seeing these recurring issues with high transaction fees and gas fees on the Ethereum mainnet. But there wasn't a lot of users in DeFi still. Like if we think about from the total number of users of on-chain applications. Anyways, let me continue. So I was sharing a little bit of background and context on the BNB chain journey. So I was talking about when we were really starting back in September 2020 was around the time that just after like the whole DeFi summer was really kicking off. And at the time, all of the DeFi activity was really happening on the Ethereum mainnet. But we saw these recurring periods where there was like very high transaction fees, and it became a little bit exclusionary for pricing out a lot of users. So also at the same time, there wasn't a really huge number of users in DeFi. It's like in the very low millions, if at all that number, maybe like mid hundreds thousands. So it's not like a really large number of users, especially if you want to talk about global adoption. So we were really thinking about scalability from on-chain perspective. So in the initial period when the BNB chain mainnet was first launched, we started seeing a lot of developer interest and project teams building out applications in a wide range of use cases, including DeFi, but many others as well. At the same time, we saw that large user growth happening for those applications. And last year, of course, was a year of massive expansion for the whole crypto ecosystem, where there was many new users and many new users in decentralized applications, which is also great. But at the same time, we also started seeing some limitations and kind of different types of challenges from an infrastructure perspective. So things like data indexing and things that are quite critical for developers that were not really designed for the fast block speed of the BNB chain. So they were kind of designed for 13-second block times, which was what's happening on the Ethereum mainnet, but on BNB chain, blocks are being produced every 3 seconds. So that starts to create a number of challenges and issues around not only with data indexing but many other areas as well. So we're been working and supporting the developer community and teams that are building out infrastructure to really support faster blockchains and also more scalable blockchains. So those are a number of different areas that need to be thought of quite differently. So fast forward to today, we see that BNB chain is currently supporting anywhere between 1 to 2 million daily active addresses. The transaction volumes, the peak was just a little bit above 16 million transactions in a 24-hour period, and currently it's like fluctuating between 5 to 6 million transactions per day. But in the current situation where things are, we see that the BNB chain capacity is maybe like reaching half the capacity of what it can support in a performant way. But that's a long way from where we really want to go. So we've also seen in the same period this idea of application chains. And we've also seen this emerging layer 2 ecosystem, which is really great, and it creates a lot of choice, which is really important for developers in terms of the type of infrastructure they want to build applications on top. So for the BNB chain specifically, we've been thinking a lot about how can we really provide infrastructure that allows developers to build really scalable applications. So we have two strategies of how we're addressing this. In the short term, we're working on rolling out application chains. So these are application-specific chains. So the advantages for application-specific chains for developers is that it will allow for a much more manageable scaling experience. So what I mean by that is that in the current BNB chain, it's a shared infrastructure. It's a permissionless chain. So any addresses can deploy contracts on there. It's completely permissionless. But it means a few things. So let's say you're a game developer. If you're a game developer building on shared infrastructure, it's quite difficult to have a view of the growth that's happening for other applications that are also using the same chain. So if other applications start having massive user growth and start consuming more capacity of the chain, which is limited, like the block space is limited, then that starts having impact on your projects as well. So it starts having impact for your users. It can mean higher transaction fees because obviously transaction fees are dynamic. It's kind of how the block space is being priced. So as the demand for block space increases, the price increases, that can affect your end users as well. So with application-specific chains addresses these issues because it's not permissionless. It's permissioned for how contracts are deployed there. So Axie Infinity is a really great example of a project that's using an application-specific chain. So for those who are not familiar, Axie Infinity is has the largest number of users among any blockchain game. So at its peak was over 1 million users per day. So Axie Infinity is built on its own chain, an application-specific chain called Roman. So it really is one of the great examples of an application that can achieve massive user growth, but does need its own infrastructure. So we will be rolling out the application chains as part of the BNB chain ecosystem towards the summer of this year. Development work that is being driven by the community currently. And it will mean a number of things for the developers using these application chains. So one is much lower transaction fees. So BNB chain is already fairly low transaction fees. It's around 30 cents per transactions, but that might be for some use cases a little bit, it may be expensive for some use cases. So the application chains also aim to address this particular issue. So the transaction fees on the application chains can be small fractions of a cent or even gasless, for example. So the other big advantage is that you have the ability to manage the end user experience in a much better way. So you can look at different things. So for example, if you see the number of website visits increasing significantly, then you have the ability to scale up your infrastructure in advance so that it doesn't have any kind of big impact on the end user experience. So the application chains we're launching, we expect will be used by games in the beginning, but will be applicable for many other use cases and domains as well. So that's our short-term strategy around how to achieve scaling and provide highly scalable infrastructure that can support mass adoption use cases. In the medium to long term, we're working on what we're calling the BNB partition chain. So this is very similar to the ETH2 sharding strategy. So these sharded chains will also help to increase the scalability, but even there, it's still, I would say, in research and development stages. And there also, I think developers, we need to think differently about how to achieve a good end user experience and also from the scalability perspective. So even sharding is not going to be a solution that will fix all of those problems, because eventually you will have different types of issues around composability, for example, and then some shards. I think using a city analogy is good when thinking about sharding, is that some shards will be like very crowded cities and others will be more like the countryside, for example. So you might have some shards that are occupied by a lot of DeFi protocols where you have a lot of activity happening on, and then you'll have other shards which are where you don't have as many applications on, and you have much bigger bandwidth and capacity to scale in these shards. So I think for developers that are thinking about building applications need to consider all of these different factors. So it's about the core infrastructure, your layer 1 or your layer 2. Then also thinking about the type of developer tooling and other types of things that you need to use to build your project. Like, are these really optimized for the level of scaling that you are looking to achieve? So thinking about these questions in advance has a lot of benefits for anticipating the scaling requirements. It's also, I think, important for the developer communities and teams that are building use cases, whatever they may be, to think really carefully about what's really needed to be on chain and how to really optimize those, because not everything really needs to be on chain. So thinking about what makes most sense for specific use cases, thinking about these questions in advance is also super important. So that's a high-level summary about the BNB chain journey around scalability, the growth that we've achieved, and some of the key lessons and learnings that we had along that way, as well as some insights on the scaling roadmap for the BNB chain. So happy to take any questions. Feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or in the discuss chat box. There's a couple of questions coming in. So Theo's asking, do you think the BSC bridge will be the only one? That's a good question. So for us, we're really focused on providing and supporting infrastructure developers, including bridges, that there is choice for developers and for users. So there's already multiple bridges that support the BNB chain or BSC today. But I think we're also just seeing the early version of bridges today. Like, I think it's also important for bridges to enable a lot of different types of use cases, including around interoperability. So today if you think about bridges, a lot of them are just supporting wrapped assets and different types of methods of wrapping assets across chains. But also today we're seeing more advanced bridging capabilities. So especially the ability with bridges that have the ability to pass arbitrary messages. So that opens up a lot of different types of interoperability use cases, both in the DeFi space as well as in others, including in gaming, for example. So I think in gaming, if you think about today, we see more and more gaming projects that are using NFTs, but these NFTs being interoperable also becomes increasingly important. So we may reach a point soon where games can issue NFTs across multiple chains natively, and those games can still use the NFTs inside the game in a way that persists state changes across different chains. As those NFTs change, like are used inside the game and whatever happens with them. Same thing in the DeFi context. So think about, for example, users being able to collateralize assets on one chain and issue a loan on another chain while still having like efficient cross-chain liquidations. So these are the type of bridge infrastructures that we're starting to see emerging today, and I think there's going to be a lot more innovation around that space. So there's another question. Mirella has asked if I can share something about traceability of info on the blockchain and auditability. So I think that's a good question. So I think that's one of the like most beautiful features of blockchain, especially public permissionless blockchain, is that all the data is publicly visible. Of course, it's very difficult to read because like addresses could belong, like it's very difficult to know who an address belongs to. Like any new address created could belong to an individual, could belong to a group of individuals, belong to a corporation, could belong to an AI. So while all the information is publicly available and publicly auditable through tools like Etherscan, BSC scan, and other types of analytics tools, I think that's really one of the key things. So there is also today starting to emerge two key areas, I think, related to blockchain traceability and auditability. So some of them are quite important for different types of use cases. So one is around private transactions. So exactly because all transactions are completely public, for corporations and enterprises, of course, they don't want all of that information, especially transaction information, payment-related information, to be publicly auditable. So we're seeing today also a lot of important infrastructure emerging around private transactions. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is also around compliance. So compliance is that addresses can be whitelisted, be linked to some KYC and compliance-related info, but in a privacy-preserving manner. Yeah, so there's a few more questions here. There's a question about adoption of BSC in Kenya, and also asks what are the opportunities and challenges. So it's kind of a broad question, but I like it. So I think we've seen and continue to see adoption of BNB chain across all countries in Africa, but around the world as well. Because I think today BNB chain offers accessibility for all types of users, regardless of their net on-chain asset values, allows users to participate in DeFi protocols in any applications built on BNB chain infra in a very affordable and accessible way. So I think there are a number of, that's really the opportunities, like having this globally accessible infrastructure, so anybody with an internet connection, regardless of where they are, can access these decentralized applications in a very affordable way. So that's the big opportunity. I think around challenges, it's many. I think today there's a lot of friction points. That there are great teams working on addressing a lot of these. So these are including, for example, wallets. So is it really possible for everybody to securely store their seed phrase and private keys? For some people, they can do it. For some people, it's maybe not as comfortable for them to do it. So I think there are a lot of great wallets today that address this particular user experience issue. So providing this Web 2.0 type of experience, or log in with Facebook, log in with Google, and the users don't need to manage their own private keys or seed phrases. So that's definitely, I think, a key user experience challenge that needs to be addressed in order to really drive more adoption. But thankfully, there's a lot of great teams working on this and other user experience challenges. There's another question around oracles pulling off-chain data. So of course, there's really great projects like Chainlink is one is the leader in that space, but there's others as well that are using that are able to securely provide on-chain Oracle feeds for off-chain data, including real-world data from many sources. There are Chainlink feeds on BNB chain today, and the number of feeds are also continuing to increase. So the answer is yes, there's Oracle feeds available on BNB chain pulling off-chain data today. There's a couple of comments as well. I'll try to address some of these. I think we might be.
Hey, Samy, how are you?
Doing good. Sorry about my internet connection. I had to happen during the live session.
No problem. It's okay. I mean, at least we got quite a lot of what you were saying. But I think there were a couple of questions from the audience. If you one of the article, are there chains getting Oracle right with pulling in off-chain data?
Yeah, I think I answered this one. So the answer is yes. So there's I think the leader in that space is Chainlink today. So Chainlink feeds are available on BNB chain today. There's a number of feeds, and then the number of feeds also continues to grow. There's another question, I guess, from I don't want to say his name wrong, but he's asking about the session recording. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing, the last question I just want to, what in terms of education, what is BNB doing in terms of education in the African continent, and what is the deepening process that you are looking to do at the minute?
Good question. Thanks for that one. So we're doing a number of things in the education space. So one is we have a number of activities that we're doing around developer education. So we host a lot of hackathons globally. We did a hackathon, a large one in Africa last year. We look at doing another one again soon. But we're doing them in regions across the world around supporting developers, regardless of what stage they are in their development careers, like either beginners or experienced professionals getting into Web3. So these include sharing best practices as well as other types of support for developers to build projects. So in the initial product development stage, as well as support in terms of growth and user scaling. So that's on the developer education side, and we're also looking at providing educational resources and support for end users as well. Because of course, for new users starting to play around with decentralized applications can be a little bit intimidating, like how to set up a wallet correctly, how to get assets on chain, all of these kind of things. So we're providing a bunch of resources. So head over to Binance Academy to check out these resources as well as build.dev, which is our developer site. I'll just share that here in the chat box.
Awesome.
As well as chain.world. I'll share a couple of links in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Samy. I think that was one important thing that a lot of people wanted to know who were sending me private messages. So I'm sure people can go and check out a lot of the links that Samy had sent. Thank you again for participating and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us, and also as our sponsor, BNB Chain. We look forward to seeing you again next year, hopefully this time in person.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.